Well, hello everybody. It is Tuesday, which means that I am back in the kitchen. Welcome to my kitchen. Today we'll be cooking up another delicious, easy to make anti-inflammatory dish. I was trying to think of a theme for today's cooking class, and I was thinking of the holidays coming up, a lot of holidays, Easter, Passover, Ramadan, and trying to think of a dish that might be useful for maybe all three. And it turns out that lamb is a very popular food to be eating in springtime. And I have this recipe for a Moroccan soup, which traditionally is made with lamb, but I'm actually going to put an American twist on it and make it vegetarian. It's actually very rich in proteins as is because it contains a lot of very healthy beans, lentils, two different types of lentils. In fact, we'll be using a red lentil and a brown lentil, as well as some chickpeas. So the difference is that I'm not putting the lamb in it because typically this dish has lamb in it. It is called harira, and it is a dish that is a popular dish that's used to break the fast for Ramadan. So we can enjoy it year round. I thought it might be a good theme to make today. So to get started, what I'd like to do, let me just clear off my cutting board here, is I heated up my pot here. I have a Dutch oven. I like to use a Dutch oven for this because it has a nice heavy base, which allows me to saute very nicely my vegetables. I'm going to start off with an onion and celery, and I actually pre-cut those so that we could get started more quickly. So I have one large onion chopped up, a fairly small dice. Let me show you what I have here. Okay, fairly small dice. I have about, a large onion comes to maybe about 2 cups. I'm going to add some olive oil to my pot here that I said is already heated up. I like to heat up my pot first and then add in the olive oil. I'm going to turn this down a little bit because it is very hot. And add in that chopped onion. You can probably hear it sizzling, right? And I'm going to give that a stir. I want to coat all of the onion with the olive oil. And I don't want it to burn. I'm also going to add in 2 stalks of celery. Now for this recipe, you can use celery stalks, but also what's nice is you can use the leaves of the celery. Since I'm using the stalks here, I'm adding the celery in right now. If you were to use the celery leaves, I would wait till later on to add them in because you don't want them to burn while you're doing this saute. And I'm just going to let this now saute until the onions start to soften. It should only take a couple of minutes to do that. And in the meantime, what I'm going to do then is mince my garlic. I like to add the garlic in afterwards so I don't overcook the garlic. It can burn very easily, especially when you're mincing it because it's such a small size. I'm going to give this, I've got 4 very nice sized cloves here. Which, as you know, I like to smash just to get that skin off of each of the cloves. Oops. Makes it a lot easier process. So what I like about this dish is it has a lot of anti-inflammatory features to it. It's a nice hearty dish. I can imagine after a fast, you're looking for something that's nice and satisfying. The beans in this do both. The beans provide protein, fiber, which is anti-inflammatory, and are very filling. Now, if you were adding lamb to this dish, what you want to do is brown your lamb cubes before adding in the veggies. Brown the cubes, remove it, and then start with the recipe as I have here. If you have leftover lamb from another meal, then by all means, you can add in the lamb just at the very end, just to reheat it in the soup. So as you can see, I'm just going through now, just with that rocking motion, right, to chop the garlic into small pieces. All right. The good, healthy antioxidants in garlic come out after you cut it. So it's nice to cut that up before adding it into our dish. So I'm going to add in the garlic now. Give that a stir. The onions are starting to get translucent, just the way I'd like them to. And let me just show you what we have here. All right. And while the garlic is sauteing, let me just grab a rag here, clean off my cutting board. While that onion, or the garlic rather, is sauteing, I'm going to add in the spices. And that's another anti-inflammatory feature of this dish. Ooh, yum. And deliciousness of the dish. Moroccan spices are delicious. I love these. I have some turmeric here. I'm going to add some cumin, some ginger, cayenne, and a little bit of cinnamon. So to start off, I'm going to add in 2 teaspoons of my turmeric. Did you know it's never a good idea to add the spices right over the pot, because the steam from the pot can accelerate the aging of your spices. So it's always nice to measure out your spices while not hovering over the pot. I have to remind myself of that sometimes. It's kind of hard to remember when you're in a hurry, right? All right. And then I'm going to add an equal amount of cumin, which means another 2 teaspoons of cumin. See, I got awfully close to that pot there. All right. And then I'm going to add in an equal amount of ginger. Now, I had my ginger here that I was going to use, but a very good friend of mine gave me a gift of some ginger from the Spice House, which when I smell it, oh my goodness, it smells so fresh. So this is the first time I'm trying this, but I'm sure it's going to be wonderful. And thank you so much for the gift. All right, so let me take out 2 teaspoons then of this ginger. Oh, it does smell so good. It's amazing the differences that a good spice or good fresh ingredient can make. If you have fresh ginger, by all means, use fresh ginger. 2 tablespoons of minced fresh ginger would be perfect in this. I'm going to give this a stir. It's nice to add the spices before you add liquids because it allows the flavors of the spices to bloom. It's just kind of a fancy way of saying they meld and more of the flavor comes out. blend. So I've added in now my turmeric, my cumin, my fresh ginger, my new ginger. I'm going to add in some black pepper. I have some fresh ground black pepper, 1 teaspoon, that I'm adding in as well. And here's something special. Now, you don't have to add this ingredient, but it is something very special, which is saffron. Saffron, when you buy it, will come in little containers because it is relatively expensive, but it has a flavor that is different than anything else that you might be able to add in. And I'm going to add in a healthy pinch of saffron into my dish. That's a little special treat to myself that I added in. It's very difficult to procure this saffron because it comes from the fine filaments of a very small flower. So, but it has a beautiful color and it has a flavor to the dish. And then I'm going to add in some cinnamon. Now, I can add a 1/4 teaspoon of regular ground cinnamon, but I'm going to add in a cinnamon stick. Because I'm adding the stick in, I'm not going to add it in quite yet. I'm going to wait till I add the liquids in. Please remind me if I forget to add in the the cinnamon. All right, so I have that. I want to add in a little bit of cayenne. I'm going to add in about 1/8 of a teaspoon of cayenne. If you like your soups, your meals spicy, hotter, by all means, you can add more. I find this adds just the right amount of heat for me. All right, and now I want to give this all a good stir. Yum. All right. So now that that's cooking and the spices are blooming, it's time for me to add some liquid in. So let's add now. Another ingredient that I failed to mention is tomatoes. So 1 28-ounce can is sufficient. I couldn't find the 28-ounce can of diced tomatoes, so I ended up going with 2 14-ounce cans. And I'm just going to add in my tomatoes. Now, what's nice about this dish is that I'm using the canned ingredients, which make it cook more quickly. If you have fresh tomatoes, by all means, maybe probably about 4 cups of fresh chopped tomatoes can be added instead of the canned tomatoes. Same thing goes true for the beans that we're going to be adding. You can use dried beans instead of canned beans. It just means that you need to cook the soup a little bit longer. In order to accelerate the process, if you're using the dried beans, is to soak the beans overnight, and that'll have them cooking more quickly. So I've added now in my tomatoes. I'm going to add in 6 cups of either broth or water. In this case, I am just adding water. I found that the flavors, there's so many spices and everything in this, that just using the water is a good base for the soup. So I have 6 cups here that I'm going to add in. I'm going to add a little bit of salt. About 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. And you can always go in later on and add more if you find that it needs it. I tend to like to stay back on the amount of salt that I add because I don't want too much added salt in my dishes. Although salt is very important because it brings out the flavor. You don't want something to taste salty. What you want it to do is you want the salt to enhance the natural flavors of the dish. So I have my salt added now, and I'm going to add in about 2 tablespoons of fresh chopped cilantro. So I like to store my cilantro in a glass of water when I get back from the market. I usually will put a plastic bag over that and stick it into the refrigerator. Cilantro tends to go bad very quickly. It wilts and then goes bad very quickly, unfortunately. So that's one way to prolong the life of the cilantro. So I have about 2 tablespoons here of cilantro, as I said. If you don't have cilantro, if you don't like cilantro, you could use fresh parsley instead. So I'm just going to add that in right there. All right, this would be right now where I'd say, does anybody have any questions? Let me know. All right. I'm going to up the heat under my soup here to get it started going. I added in everything, let's see, up into this point. Let's see if I've got everything. I added in my spices. I added in my tomatoes. Now, when I added in the tomato, here's a good point. If you didn't add the celery to begin with, you could add your celery leaves chopped up right here in this part. And I, would say, probably about a 1/4 cup of chopped leaves can go in for that as well at this time when the liquid's in. So we have the celery, salt, we have the cilantro, and I'm going to now add in my cinnamon stick, right? Remember, I didn't add in cinnamon originally. So I'm just going to add in one, like 3 to 4 inch stick of cinnamon. What's nice about this dish is that because you're adding that cinnamon stick, the flavor will come out as the cinnamon stick sits in the broth for a longer period of time. This dish tastes really good as a leftover as well. So sometimes it even tastes better, I think, than initially. So letting it sit, making it ahead of time is a good thing. All right, so we're going to bring this now to a boil. Have that cooking. And it's going to take a little bit of time here. So I might just accelerate the process a little bit by prepping and adding in my beans while I'm waiting for this to at least warm up, right? I'm not working on my stove where I have a little bit more control over the heat. This is a electric plate that's here. Takes a little bit more time, more finicky. So while we're waiting for that to come up to a boil, I am going to take my red lentils. Now I have dried red lentils here instead of canned. Why? Because red lentils cook a lot more quickly than the brown or the green lentils do. So it's very easy to add them in. And in this dish, what will probably happen is these will probably melt into the soup, making the juices of the soup nice and thick. So what I've done is taken 1 cup of my beans and rinsed them thoroughly. This is just a sieve that's here. Just rinse them thoroughly, checked for, they've kind of stuck together because they've been sitting in my sink draining for a few minutes. So I'm just going to break them up a little bit. But you can see they are smaller than brown lentils. And they do tend to give a nice creamy finish to the soup. So I'm going to add that in. Oh, good. It's starting to heat up now. I'm adding in my lentils. And then I'm going to take out, open up my can of lentils here. What's nice about getting canned beans or beans in general, organic beans tend to be pretty close in price to the conventionally grown beans. So whenever possible, I will get an organic brand of my beans. And I am going to just rinse through these beans here. As I said, beans are a good source of fiber. They're also, especially if you're vegetarian, a prime source for protein in your diet. Now, if you're adding the lamb to this dish, you know the beans aren't as critical for that. They are just a fiber source, which is a good anti-inflammatory nutrient for us. Whoops. I'm going to add in my chickpeas and rinse them. Give those a little bit of a drain. All right. And I'm going to add that in. All right, things are starting to steam up here. Starting to heat up. I've added now all of my beans. Remember, it was the red lentils, the brown or green lentils, and my chickpeas. Now, I want to show you what I have here. Let's see if I can, okay, show you. It looks very liquidy, right? I just wanted to show that to you because that's the way it's going to look for a little while. Until it cooks down. And even with the beans being pre-cooked, a lot of liquid will cook down and out of this as the soup simmers. And I'm going to let this simmer probably for about 45 minutes. Probably half an hour is enough. What I want to happen is I want the beans to get nice and soft. Now, if you had browned your lamb ahead of time, now would be the time to add the lamb into the dish. I'm going to cover this. I'm just going to loosely cover it, leave it open a little bit so that some of the liquid can evaporate. And I'm going to let that, as I said, simmer. Now, here's another thing. Part of the traditional harira is to add in vermicelli or a very like angel hair spaghetti broken into small bite-sized pieces, maybe about 2 inches long. What I have here, because I don't add wheat, I don't include wheat in my diet, I have some pre-cooked rice noodles. When I'm done with this, I'll add the rice noodles in and just let them cook for, a few minutes just to heat them up. And that's just a little bit of texture to add to the dish. It's an optional ingredient. You do not need to add it in. But I thought I would just mention that because the traditional harira has the noodles added to it. So we're now waiting for this to simmer. You saw what it looked like before being finished. I would like to show you what it looks like once it's done cooking, because it does transform itself a little bit. So, very conveniently, I have a bowl here. Let me grab now a batch of the harira that I made yesterday and have had simmering on the stove here to show you the difference of what the finished dish looks like. I added in a little bit of water, and you may want to do this when you're reheating. Added in a little bit of water to get the a soupy consistency that I wanted. So here is the finished soup. I'm going to show you again. I'll grab a spoon. So here you have it. Now, to finish this off, we can add in a few leaves of cilantro and a nice squeeze of lemon. And there you have it. That's our finished bowl. And here you can see the finished consistency and what it looks like. It's a little hot. Yum. So the beans now are nice and soft. They add a nice consistency to the dish. The tomatoes have cooked down. The spices have blended into this wonderful, rich flavor. So, I hope you have a wonderful holiday season this spring. I hope you get to try one of these wonderful anti-inflammatory dishes that I've been making over the last few weeks. This one in particular, as I said, is one typical for Ramadan, but lamb seems to be a theme going through for many of the holidays. If you get to try the dish, let me know. I'd be very happy to hear what you think of it. If you have any suggestions of a dish that you might like to see, maybe it's a traditional dish that typically you think might not be anti-inflammatory because of the ingredients it contains. Call me, email me, I am me. Let me know, and I can work with that recipe to make it more anti-inflammatory, which in turn will help us age better. And you'll enjoy your traditional dish as well. So, until next week, please stay well, enjoy the holidays, and I will see you Tuesday. Take care now. Bye-bye.